Some big news announced from the Biden administration today. The Taliban has killed an ISIS-K leader. According to Biden administration officials, that leader is the same person who planned the deadly attack on American troops and Afghan civilians at the Kabul airport during the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from the country. 13 American service members, you'll remember, and more than 170 Afghans were killed in that bombing back in 2021. Joining me now from the White House is John Kirby, the coordinator for strategic communications for the National Security Council. John, thank you for coming on. What more can you tell us about this? What was this ISIS leader's name? How was he killed?
Well, we're not at liberty to talk about his specific name necessarily, Kate, but we are confident, based on information that we've been able to glean, that this is the individual who was, as we've called him, the mastermind of that Abbey Gate attack. And of course, our condolences, our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to all the families of those 13 service members lost, as well as the family members of Afghan victims of that terrible, terrible day. But we know that the Taliban took this individual out, killed him in an operation that they were conducting on their own without any assistance, certainly from the United States. And it's important, I think, for viewers to remember that the Taliban and ISIS are mortal enemies there in Afghanistan. They continue to fight one another. As a matter of fact, this is the third senior leader that the Taliban have killed in terms of ISIS-K leadership.
John, can you talk to me about the hesitancy in releasing the leader's name? I was just looking this morning and saw back in the beginning of April, CENTCOM in a press release very clearly named another ISIS leader that was taken out in Syria.
Yeah, I wish I could give you more context here, Kate. We're just not able to speak publicly about the name right now. There's reasons for that, but I can tell you that we're confident that this is the individual who, in fact, masterminded that attack.
John, after the Abbey Gate attack, everyone will remember President Biden's speech that night, and he vowed retribution. I mean, in it, he said, "We will not forgive, we will not forget, we will hunt you down and make you pay." The fact that the Taliban is who killed this leader, does this speak to the limits of U.S. capabilities in Afghanistan after the withdrawal?
No, actually, Kate, I think it validates the president's decision to leave Afghanistan altogether. You don't need to have a big presence on the ground, boots on the ground, to go after terrorist threats, whether they're in Afghanistan or elsewhere. Now, look, the Taliban killed this individual. I think it's a good thing that he's gone. I think it's a great thing that he's no longer walking the earth and no longer can plan attacks and conduct attacks against anyone, let alone American interests. But look, I think it's also important to remember we killed al-Zawahiri while he was sitting on a balcony in Kabul, Afghanistan, using over-the-horizon capabilities, and we've taken out other ISIS leaders in Somalia and in Syria, again, using over-the-horizon. What the president said also that day was that we're going to make sure we can continue to sharpen and improve our abilities to go after these guys in an over-the-horizon, low-footprint way, and we've actually proven that case time and time again.
With this, does President Biden, does the Biden administration trust the Taliban any more today than they did previous to this?
No, ma'am. This is not about trust. You know, not at all. And we weren't involved in this. We didn't partner with them on this. They said in their agreement, which they signed under the Trump administration, that they were going to not allow Afghanistan to become a safe haven for al-Qaeda or terrorist networks. We're going to hold them to that commitment. We want to see them meet that commitment. But this is not about trust, not the way that the Taliban is treating its own people, women and girls. I mean, they are not meeting all their commitments to the international community, and we're going to continue to urge them to do that.
Aaron Lieberman has been following the reaction and joins us now from the Pentagon. So Aaron, the mastermind behind the Kabul attack that left these 13 U.S. servicemen dead, these 170 Afghans killed, he's now dead, killed by the Taliban. How is the Pentagon reacting? What are they saying?
Well, it's interesting. We got a statement fairly late last night from the Defense Department, which says that the United States had no role in this operation or whatever happened there that led to the death of this senior ISIS-K leader. So that's telling in and of itself that there was no coordination or cooperation with the Taliban, at least according to the Defense Department, in what led to the death of this ISIS-K leader. Although the White House didn't say when this had happened, DOD saying this happened sometime in early April. What's unclear is how exactly the Taliban killed this senior ISIS-K leader, whether it was a targeted attack, they were going after this leader, or whether it was simply infighting between ISIS-K and the Taliban. Last month, it was General Eric Kurilla, the commander of U.S. Central Command, who said the ISIS-K has been carrying out more attacks throughout the region in which they are active, that is Afghanistan and some of the surrounding countries, but also that their goal was to attack U.S. interests outside of Afghanistan. Although ultimately he says they'd like to carry out an attack on the U.S. homeland, they are far from being able to do so and would more likely try to target U.S. interests abroad. Broadly speaking, that speaks to ISIS-K's intent, but the White House saying this is one of several senior ISIS-K leaders who has been killed since the beginning of the year. Even those who were critical of the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan have praised the death of this senior ISIS-K leader. For example, Representative Michael McCaul, the Republican head of the House Foreign Relations Committee, says that this is one terrorist dead, and that itself is a good thing, but it doesn't absolve the Biden administration from the responsibility of how the withdrawal from Afghanistan was handled and the deaths of the 13 U.S. service members and more than 170 Afghans in that suicide bombing in the closing days of the withdrawal. In fact, CNN also spoke with a father of one of the Marines who was killed in that attack, who had largely the same sentiment. It's good that the world got rid of a terrorist in this case, but again, what he wants to see is more accountability, more responsibility taken from not only the White House, but also the Pentagon and the State Department. Linda.
Yeah, and of course, Oren, just talk to us more about, given the fact that the U.S. is now out of Afghanistan, how difficult, how challenging it is to gather intelligence for the U.S. and its allies on ISIS-K, on other terrorism-related groups right now, given they don't really have a presence there.
It's much more difficult because it has to be done essentially from above. Spy satellites and drones flown in from far away in what the Biden administration has called its over-the-horizon capability. They point to a very small number of actions that the U.S. has taken. The targeted killing, the assassination of Zawahiri in Kabul several months ago, but there isn't much more to look at in terms of kinetic activity that the Biden administration has carried out since the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And General Kurilla, again, the commander of U.S. Central Command, has pointed out it is much harder to gather intel, to act on that intel now that the U.S. is out. So that remains one of the ongoing challenges for the military and more broadly for the U.S.
Oren Liebermann for us at the Pentagon. Good to have you with us. Thanks so much.